Michelangelo said that every block of marble already contains a sculpture. The sculptor's only job is to remove the stone that doesn't belong. It is one of the most quoted statements in the history of art. It is also, if you stand in front of 4 specific sculptures in the Accademia Gallery in Florence, the most unsettling thing you have ever heard, because these 4 figures are still inside the stone. Their bodies twist, strain, push against the marble from within. Shoulders emerging, legs half-formed, faces turning upward as if toward air. And they never got out. They have been suspended in that moment of almost emergence for 500 years. Still trapped. Still reaching. A question that no one has fully answered is whether Michelangelo meant to free them or whether leaving them trapped was the point all along. The 4 sculptures are known collectively as the prisoners or the slaves. Commissioned in 1513 by Pope Julius II for his tomb, an enormous funerary monument intended to be the most ambitious sculptural project of the Renaissance, they were never installed. The commission was renegotiated and reduced so many times that by the time the final tomb was completed in 1545, it bore almost no resemblance to the original plan. Michelangelo kept the slaves in his workshop for over 20 years, neither finishing them nor discarding them. He eventually gave them to his friend Roberto Strozzi, who presented them to the King of France. They passed through several collections, spent centuries in the Louvre, and were transferred to Florence only in 1908, nearly 400 years after they were begun. Michelangelo never explained what he intended them to become, and this is where the story becomes stranger. Look at the awakening slave first, the largest and most dramatically unfinished of the 4. A figure is emerging from the block at an almost violent angle, the torso twisting, one leg barely defined, the head only partially released from the surrounding stone. The face is unfinished to the point where features are only suggested, and yet the figure communicates something: urgency, struggle, effort, with more force than many fully completed sculptures manage. The Atlas slave is even more extreme. The figure appears to be carrying the block on its back, head bowed under the weight of the uncarved stone above it. The body below the shoulders is worked to a high degree of finish. The head disappears back into the marble entirely, swallowed by the block as if the stone has reclaimed it. The young slave and the bearded slave complete the group, each at a different stage of emergence, each communicating the same impossible condition: a body caught between existence and non-existence, between the sculptor's intention and the material's resistance. The technical term for what you are looking at is non finito, the unfinished. And this is where the first explanation begins, and where it immediately starts to fall apart. The non finito theory holds that Michelangelo deliberately left works unfinished as an aesthetic statement, that the struggle between figure and stone was itself the subject, and that completing the figures would have destroyed the tension that makes them powerful. By this reading, the slaves are not abandoned. They are finished exactly as intended. There is evidence for this. Michelangelo left other significant works unfinished: the Rondinini Pieta, the Palestrina Pieta, the Matthew for the Florence Cathedral. The pattern is consistent enough to suggest intention rather than accident. Contemporary writers in his circle described unfinished works with admiration, as if incompleteness were a virtue rather than a failure. But the evidence against this reading is equally compelling. The slaves were commissioned for a specific purpose, the tomb of a pope, and that purpose required them to be finished. If Michelangelo intended them as permanent statements of non finito, he was producing deliberately incomplete work for a patron who had paid for complete sculptures. This is not a small distinction. It is the difference between artistic philosophy and professional failure. And there is one more detail that complicates the non-finito theory entirely. Michelangelo's working method was unusual in a way that bears directly on this question. Most sculptors of his period worked across the entire surface of a block simultaneously, roughing out the full form before refining any single area. Michelangelo worked differently. He entered the block from the front, carving inward as if releasing a figure that was pressing toward him from within the stone. He worked section by section, finishing one area to a high degree before moving to the next dot. This means that the uneven finish of the slaves, some areas polished, others barely roughed out, is not the result of a sculptor stepping back from a work in progress. It is the result of a sculptor who is moving through the block systematically and simply stopped before reaching the parts that remained uncarved. He stopped. But why? The Julius Tomb project was in chaos for most of the period when the slaves were being worked on. Michelangelo was constantly pulled away to other commissions: the Sistine Chapel ceiling, projects for the Medici, architectural work in Florence. The tomb was renegotiated so many times that the figures intended for it became disconnected from any fixed purpose. By the time the final reduced tomb design was settled, there was no place for the slaves in it. This is the practical explanation. The project changed. The figures became irrelevant. Michelangelo moved on. But this explanation has a problem. Michelangelo kept the slaves. For over 20 years, he held on to these figures, neither finishing them nor destroying them. A sculptor who had simply abandoned irrelevant work would not have kept it in his workshop for 2 decades. He was keeping them for a reason. What that reason was, he never said. Now look at the figures again with a different question in mind. The standard interpretation of the slaves frames them as figures, struggling to escape the stone, the marble as prison, the sculptor as liberator. This is the reading that aligns with Michelangelo's own statement about freeing the figure from the block. The stone is the obstacle. The figure is the victim. The sculptor's job is rescue, but the Atlas slave, specifically, complicates this reading in a way that cannot be explained away. Atlas, in classical mythology, was condemned to hold up the sky for eternity, not trapped in stone, but carrying stone. The weight that crushes him is not the material he is made of. It is the material he is condemned to support. If Michelangelo named this figure Atlas, the stone above the head is not a prison the figure is escaping. It is a burden the figure is bearing, deliberately, without end, which means the slave is not fighting the marble. He is holding it up. And if that reading extends to the other 3 figures, if they are not struggling to escape, but rather supporting, enduring, carrying something that will never be lifted, then the entire symbolic logic of the group reverses. The stone is not the enemy. The stone is the condition. And the figures are not almost free. They have always been exactly where they were meant to be. This is the reading that the non-finito theory cannot account for, and the practical explanation cannot reach. It requires neither artistic philosophy nor contractual failure. It requires only the possibility that Michelangelo carved 4 figures in the posture of struggle and left them there because struggle, held in permanent marble, was the only honest thing he could say about the human condition. Whether he knew he was doing this, or whether the figures arrived at this meaning without his full intention, is a question that 5 centuries of scholarship has not been able to settle. The slaves still stand in the Accademia Gallery in Florence. At the entrance to the hall that contains the David, most visitors walk past them on their way to the more famous work at the end of the corridor. The slaves watch them go. Michelangelo has been dead for over 450 years. The question of what he intended these figures to become died with him. What remained is 4 blocks of marble with human forms pressing out of them, and no explanation of whether the pressure was ever meant to succeed. The stone has not moved. The figures have not gotten free. And the question they place in front of you, whether you are looking at 4 unfinished, sculptures or 4 perfectly finished ones, is the same question. Michelangelo left open when he walked away from them. He never came back to answer it. Neither has anyone else